Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Dean Rogers. Welcome back to the Dean Rogers Show. I've got a very special guest, Kathy Fettke. Welcome to the show, Kathy.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So, guys, just want to give you a little bit of taste of who we got here today. Very special. Honored to have her here. Kathy got started in real estate about 20 years ago. You got to hear the story. She had her husband falsely diagnosed with cancer. So I can't wait to unpack that and see what that was like. But that was what helped Kathy propel into real estate to find, the income and the flexibility that real estate can provide. And then got started investing in out-of-state investing, developed pretty much the turnkey rental model that there is today, and got involved in syndications. And then she's been all over the media on Fox and ABC Market Watch and NPR, CNN, Wall Street Journal, the whole 9 yards. She's been on all of them. And I've seen some of those segments that you've done, which are so cool. So it'd be great to talk about that. You've got a book, Retire Rich with Rentals, which is a topic that I love, and that's the game plan that I'm on as well. And you've got your podcast, A Real Wealth Show. You can check out Kathy on Instagram at Kathy Fettke. You just type that in right there, and we'll put it up on the screen. You've got some other websites, yourrealwealth.com. You can go to kathyfettke.com and growthdevelopments.com for syndications. So, man, highlight reel right there. Lots of great stuff. And Kathy, great to have you here. So let's start where we always start, which is at the beginning, how you got started in real estate.
Well, I think just like everybody, we knew that real estate would be a good idea, but we thought that you had to be rich first to get into it. So, we always hoped and prayed, but I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and most people who invest in real estate, they get a cash flow, but it's of the negative variety. Right. Yep. It's like negative cash flow. So it's like people were feeding their properties with the hope that prices would just continue to rise. And that just seemed like a rich person's game, right? Who can afford to do that? So it wasn't until 2003 when my husband had come out with his book called Extreme Success, and he was traveling the country, kind of like the next Tony Robbins, I guess you could say. He had been published by Simon & Schuster and was on this media tour. But he came, it was so cool. And we had just bought we actually were able to get our first property, but because we house hacked before we knew that was like a term from Bigger Pockets. But we got this massive house, 6-bedroom house, and rented out the office and rented out the in-law suite. So that kind of made it possible for us to live there. So we were living in a really, living our dreams, 2 little kids, beautiful house. Rich got his book signed, or, sponsored by Simon & Schuster. So everything was amazing until he came home and saw this freckle on his leg. He's a redhead with so many freckles, but he noticed this freckle, and it was melanoma. They actually did diagnose it as melanoma. What they misdiagnosed was they thought that it had spread all through his body, and that they literally told him, you probably have just a few months.
Wow.
Melanoma was a big killer back then. I mean, this is 20 years ago. So today there's a lot, other options, but they didn't really have those options then. And most people just died from it. Wow. So that was, and he knew a lot of people who had died from it. So it was a really scary thing. Fortunately, it had not spread, and they were able to cut it out. And he was proven to be cancer-free about a year later. But in that 1 year time period, I had been in broadcasting. That was my career. I was a news writer and part-time anchor woman in San Francisco. But when I had little kids and got married, I just didn't want to chase murderers and fires, and wasn't what I wanted to raise the kids. So here I was, a stay-at-home mom, hadn't been working for a while, and just had no idea how we were going to get through this. If the doctor was right, that I just didn't even allow my mind to go there. We stayed so positive that, he's going to get better. Everything's going to be okay. But there was that little voice saying, what if he's not? I just decided to use the one skill I had that I had left. I still had a radio show on the weekends. It was really lightweight. I would just read news stories and kind of interpret them and get people to call in. And I focused a little bit on personal growth, but I wouldn't say it was a really popular show. But it was fun. And it kind of kept me in the broadcast business. But at this point, I was like, okay, I'm going to change the topic of my show to how to build passive income, because it was this term I had heard, but I didn't know anyone who had it. I'd read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So I knew it was like a possibility, but I had no idea how to do it. So I just made it my mission, change the topic of the show. This was pre-podcasts, and just started interviewing people and finding people who experienced this thing called passive income. And over the years, or I should say months of interviews, I learned, my eyes were opened and my audience eyes were opened to this new possibility. So that's how it started.
That's so cool. Yeah. So what a wild journey. I mean, most people wind up either the entrepreneur route, or at least most of the people I talk to wind up to real estate because of the possibilities, right? There's so many different avenues within real estate that you can focus on, little niches here and there, but ultimately, the goal for me, and it seems like the same for you, is I want to accumulate wealth and passive income so that I can retire and I can have the resources to do so. And so you had that vision and you saw passive income as that vehicle for you. So, where'd you take it from there? Right. You started to uncover and interview and probably learn and discover how you could do it. I know you said you started investing out of state. So what was that like? How did you rip that Band-Aid off and discover how to do that successfully?
Well, first, you do have to have money to invest out of state generally. Yep. There's people who wholesale. I mean, you do that. There's ways to get into real estate without having money. But I just thought I'm going to do something I already know how to do. And I knew how to do that show. I know how to broadcast. So I thought, but how do you make money from that? Sponsorships, right? That's how people make money in radio and entertainment. So I started listening to whoever was advertising. And this was 2003. So the advertisers were mortgage brokers. That was the big mortgage run up when anyone could get a loan. And it was pretty lucrative for mortgage brokers. So I just went down the list of mortgage brokers, called every single one of them and said, hey, you want to sponsor my show? Kept hearing a no. Just thought, oh man, what am I doing wrong? People are sponsoring. How do you get a sponsor? And finally I thought, I'm going to make an offer no one could refuse. So it was probably the last mortgage broker on the list. I call him up. I say, and this is in Danville, California, not far from you. Yeah. I said, hi, how would you like to be a star? I'm going to make you a star. He's like, yeah. Like, okay, when can we meet? And I offered to make him my co-host instead of a sponsor. So he was willing to write whatever check I asked for. He wrote a big check. There was some instant cash, so that really helped at the time. But then I came home to my husband and said, Rich, I am a total sellout. Now I have a mortgage show. I'm going to completely lose my audience. This is awful. He started laughing. It's like, you're going to have a financial show? Because I really had not been interested in our finances till then. I was a happy stay-at-home mom and broadcaster. So he's just like, oh boy. And then he thought, well, why don't you find out what his clients are doing with these loans? That could be interesting, these human interest stories. That's what I did. I just started interviewing his clients, and they were doing the fix and flips or the BRRRRs or the buy and holds and apartments, all these things. With many of these people I was interviewing were under the age of 30 and already retired. Wow. I was like, oh my gosh, some of these people have never gone to college. They just right out of high school started, working in real estate. And I thought, if they can do it, I have a college degree. I'm a broadcaster, for goodness sakes. If they can do it, I can do it. Well, what happened is the the stories were so compelling that our phone started ringing off the hook. My sponsor got so busy. It was so successful. And I had literally made him a star that he just one day on the set, he said, you should become a mortgage broker. I can't handle all the business this show's creating. So I got my real estate license. I became a mortgage broker during that crazy mortgage credit boom. But you could literally make $10,000 on one loan. And in those days,
wow,
someone filled out an application, you turn it into the bank, and bam, there was really not much to it back then. So our financial problems were pretty much gone at that point when I became a mortgage broker, because the show was successful and people were excited about what they could do. So that's how it started, as far as, me learning about real estate and also interviewing all these people. But then we hadn't bought investment property yet. Like I said, we had rented out these spaces in our house. We turned our house into a fourplex, and that was really helpful. That brought in a ton of money as well. And we were kind of living for free during this time when Rich wasn't working, 'cause we still didn't know if the doctor was right. And if the doctor was right, the last thing he wanted to do was work. So it's like, just do whatever you want. Not whatever you want, but have a good time during this year while we figure out this financial situation. So I was lucky enough to interview Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This was about 2005 by now. And he came on and he explained what I already knew, because I was doing mortgages at that point. And the very first loan I did was $1 million loan. I was going to make 10 grand on it. But I turned the loan in, and the bank came back and said, he doesn't qualify. And I'm like, oh, that's too bad. I'll let him know. He goes, no. We changed it. He qualifies now. I'm like, what? How do you do that? And he's like, oh, we just changed his income. Wow. Came home, told Rich, does that sound like something? Does that sound okay? And he goes, no, it sounds like fraud. Don't you put your name on that loan. Oh my gosh. And that was the business. That's how people were doing business back then. So I knew something was very, very wrong. And I refused to partake in that kind of activity, but everyone was doing it. If I didn't do the loan, the person next door would do it for me. So when Kiyosaki came on and said, this is all going to implode because we know exactly when these loans are going to reset and when people are going to have to pay, and they're not going to be able to pay because they're not qualified, and it's going to blow up. So he said this was known. It was known that these loans were going to reset in 2006, 2007. And he said the way you get out of the coming storm is you get into the fundamentals of real estate. He said, I'm selling everything in these bubble markets, all the markets that went up 40% in 1 year. Some areas have done that this past year. He's like, you got to, take your money and run. And he's like, he sold all his properties in Florida, Nevada, California, and he traded them 1031 exchange for Texas. And when I asked, well, why Texas? Because at the time, it wasn't a hot market. There was nothing happening in Texas. Prices had not gone up. The average home price was $125,000 or something. It's like, well, why? And he said, because it has the highest job growth, highest population growth in the country, but it's still 28% undervalued, meaning that the salaries were going up much faster than the home prices. So they cash flowed. I just thought, well, my goodness, that all makes sense to me. If it's good enough for Robert Kiyosaki, it's good enough for me. Rich and I jumped on a plane, went to Dallas, and started buying properties.
That's so cool. I mean, what a great opportunity to interview Robert Kiyosaki and then get that insight, that little nugget to take a look at that. And were you nervous to go out to Texas? I mean, I don't know if you'd ever been there before, or if you just said,
not
hey,
really.
we're just going to listen to Robert and go.
I had not been. I mean, why would I? No. Yeah. I hadn't been. And the first thing I did, because he just gave me that tip, but I didn't really know anything. I didn't know who he was buying from. I didn't have connections. So I just looked up a realtor, and she picked me up at the airport. And she's like, oh, you're from California? Well, I've got a great neighborhood for you. And she tells us about this neighborhood that's high-end homes, $400,000 homes. And I'm like, no. I know the average cost of a home in Dallas is 120,000. That's the neighborhood I want to be in. I want to be in the average home price. So we're just like, oh my gosh, I can't trust a realtor who just wants a commission, is kind of done with the deal. Not that all, I'm just going to take.
Yeah, not all realtors are like that, but coming from California, flying in on a plane, they're like, oh, let me show you the expensive one here.
So we thought, who can we trust? Out of state, we've got a target on our forehead that's like stupid Californian.
Yep.
And we just thought maybe the property management. So we just met with probably 10 different property managers to find out where's the rental demand, where's the best place to own a rental. That's how we created our team.
That's so cool. Man, that's smart. I mean, you just get to work in your network. And I think that's critical to be successful anywhere, is to identify who your team is. And if you don't have a team, that's one of the first things you should be working on, because I know when I've gone other places in unfamiliar, uncharted territories and haven't got a good team, I've gotten hurt, and all the reasons you said, just people that were looking to make a quick buck, and I was the sucker,
I'm going to say that's really, I hate to say it, but most people, it's finding the right team who really cares about you is critical. And to me, that was going to be property management, because they're the ones who are stuck with the property, right?
Yeah.
They're not making the upfront commission. So once I kind of understood the areas, and one of the property managers was really good. This was another sign for me, is she owned a lot of property, and she understood the market. And she explained to us that there's this little area. Well, first of all, Plano, Texas is where a lot of the jobs were going at the time. And there was this little area called Rockwall, Texas, that had A-class schools. It was on a hill, so it had views of a lake. And I mean, on a hill with views is rare in Texas. So
right.
With a lake. Flat. Yeah. So it was just a really special neighborhood. And again, brand new homes there were $140,000 for a gorgeous brand new home. So it just made sense. And again, I was a mortgage broker. I don't mean to make anyone jealous here, but at the time, we could get no money down loans on investment property, unlimited, as many as you want. So we're like, well, let's buy 5, and you just fill out the application, and boom, we were able to acquire these homes.
Amazing. What a blessing. Okay. So you get started there, you start to get familiar with the market, and where do you go from there? Do you start growing it out? I know you talked about turnkey rentals. Where do you go from there?
Well, I came back, talked about it on my podcast or on my radio show. And again, we had phones ringing off the hook of people who not only wanted mortgages, but they wanted our connections in Texas. And that's when Rich and I decided to create Real Wealth Network, where people would have a safe place to go to share information on property managers and agents, and find people that can really be trusted because there's a track record. So that's how we started our company. We're at 66,000 members today. It's grown.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah. And we would take busloads of people who had also never been to Dallas. And of course, my agent and property management company that we had worked with was thrilled. And we were able to make referral fees from them. But the best part of it was that if, now that I was representing thousands of people doing the same thing I was doing, we became a priority. That's where our members at Real Wealth were getting special treatment, because if one of our members was being mistreated by a contractor or a property manager or an agent, well, that would get around really quickly, right? Because we were doing weekly meetings and, sharing information. So again, that kind of created the strength of a community of investors. And again, is what we're still doing today. When 2008 happened and the market fell apart, I was pretty scared. I thought, oh boy, I've led all these people in this direction. But it turned out to be the right thing, because the properties that they sold, there was one woman who sold, I helped her sell 3 Stockton properties at the peak for $420,000 each that were renting for about $1,200. We helped her 1031 exchange them into 9 properties. So she sold 3. She was able to buy 9 brand new properties in Texas. She quintupled her cash flow and was able to retire. When she went, when the housing crash happened, the properties stayed rented because they were in A-class neighborhoods, really solid homes and good neighborhoods with good schools. In fact, her rents went up. Same with us, same with all of our members. The property she sold in Stockton for $420,000 each were worth about $75,000 by the end of 2008.
Crazy.
So this was the kind of thing that we had helped so many people kind of navigate the coming storm and protect themselves. That kind of got me on these different TV shows, and I won a Goldman Sachs award. It was really exciting.
Yeah. Okay.
Then in 2009, we're like, okay, now what? Now you can buy homes for I'm not kidding, $10,000. I mean, they were giving away homes in some cases. Cleveland was like, take them. We don't want them. $1, Detroit, same thing. But boy, you might have paid $1 for the property, but you were getting a home that needed a lot of fixing.
Yeah.
So we, again, just found teams of people. I went to Indianapolis. I went to Cleveland, Tampa, Atlanta, Houston. And these neighborhoods were it was terrifying. It was just boarded up homes, one after the other with foreclosure signs. And, in every 5th house, there might be an older couple looking out going, what happened to my neighborhood? There would be vagrants and drug dealers in these neighborhoods that were once really nice middle-class neighborhoods. So I would bring busloads of investors from California and from Australia, because Australians found out about me through my podcast. And they were able to, the Australians' dollar had doubled, but our values had gone down so much. They were picking up stuff for almost nothing. We'd bring busloads, and together we would buy all these houses on the streets that were boarded up. We hired teams to fix them up and make them nice, restore the neighborhoods so that we were not only helping the locals, but everybody was benefiting. The people living there got to see their neighborhoods come back, and investors got to get in really cheap. I mean, literally, we were buying these things for $10,000, $20,000, putting around $50,000 in, but they would rent for $900 to $1,200 a month.
Yeah. Wow. What an incredible story. That must have been just a wild time, feeling like the wild, wild west, just flying in and touring these neighborhoods with a bus and figuring out like, all right, let's come in here, let's clean the streets up, and let's turn this place around. That's pretty incredible to be, at the forefront of that and be leading a bunch of people through that. The experience you had must have been incredible, and learned a lot how to.
Oh, it was hard. It was so hard.
All that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, trying to manage a contractor remodeling your bathroom is hard enough, but just trying to manage a contractor, 2,000 miles away and, a plane ride away. It was very difficult. We had teams in each city managing it, but even they would get overwhelmed because in some cases there would be 90 people on the wait list trying to buy these properties because they were such a good deal. But then you have, there's always people willing to take advantage of others. So you got to stay on top of it. So there were ups and downs, but overall, people who bought back then are glad they did.
That's so cool. So, so what has your strategy been? Yours has been all out of state investing, the Californian who's going to the Midwest basically and finding opportunities that aren't taking money out of your pocket, but putting money in your pocket. And so has your focus specifically been primarily in the Texas market, or have you also gone into some of these other markets as well?
Oh, we've been in lots of markets. Like I said, during the foreclosure crisis, we were in all over the country. For the last 5 years, we've been really focused on the Southeast because that's where the demographics are going. Mm-hmm. That's where the people are moving to warmer excuse me, people are moving to warmer climates where, where there's better taxes
Yep.
and where jobs are moving. So we still love Texas, but Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, they've been really good markets too, really good growth markets. We also still love the Midwest. And surprisingly, like I love Ohio, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Dayton. These are markets that never were growth markets. You didn't go there in hopes that the values would increase. You go there for the cash flow. But over the last 2 years, we even got appreciation. Like in Cincinnati, I think prices went up 25% or something, which is unheard of. They've never seen that. So it's been an interesting time where some of the flatter linear markets actually saw appreciation too. I think that's going to stop. I don't think we'll see a lot more of that. But it's certainly been a good time to invest.
So me leaning in and listening carefully, what would you say is your favorite market to invest in right now?
Well, we started a fund. I started syndicating in 2010 in the downturn, and then it got harder and harder, right, as there was more competition.
Yep.
But right now, I feel like we're back in that sweet spot that we were in when I started syndicating in 2010, where there's not as much competition and there's more opportunity. So a lot of people are afraid right now. They're afraid of the shifting market. And I've been through enough of these now that it's time to play. Like it's go time,
Right.
So we started a fund, a $20 million fund, so that we can buy properties in the North Texas area with all cash. And I'm in the camp where I expect mortgage rates to come down next year. So we're paying cash this year and we expect to refi and buy more. But
Nice.
as soon as rates come down, it's going to be a frenzy again because we still have this massive demographic of millennials forming households. And as soon as mortgages go down, that frenzy is going to be back. So there's this little moment in time where there's no competition. So this is
the sweet spot right now.
It is. So North Texas, we focused on that for this fund. We're going to do another fund in Florida. But North Texas it's kind of been my happy place during recessions because it's just such a strong economy. And specifically North Texas, because the chip manufacturing that, I don't know if you saw, but the Biden administration wants to bring a lot of manufacturing back to the U.S., including chip manufacturing. Okay. A lot of those companies are going to North Texas. So it's turning into this Silicon Valley of Texas, that there's already obviously a lot of investors in there. But now with this pullback during these couple of months of opportunity, we're buying properties for $100,000, fixing them up to really high standards because a lot of these people working in the tech industry are going to expect nice properties. So we're bringing them up to A-class standards and bringing in these professionals making over $100,000 coming to the area.
Yeah. So I'm leaning even more now, trying to make sure I'm hearing you. So what would you call North Texas? Where are these areas, the sweet spot that you can buy $100,000 properties?
Yeah. It's the Sherman area. So it's almost on the border of Oklahoma. I don't know why this area.
So north of Dallas?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, north of Dallas. And Anna, I'm not sure how they say it, but Anna is a little town up there where it's perhaps a little bit more affordable than Sherman because Sherman is sort of on the books now as being this huge growth area. But like I said, it doesn't help that I'm talking about this on podcasts because that's bringing more investors in. but it's been really a good time to be buying because people are afraid.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm looking at the map of Texas right now. My partner, speaking of movement to Texas, he just bought some land right now with his another partnership that he has. And it's right on the outskirts of San Antonio. And it's going to be $100 million project of developing warehouses. And they've already got prospective buyers and like all this kind of stuff. Like it's big time. And super exciting stuff. Lots of growth in Texas. So that's why I'm leaning in a little bit, listening carefully, because that's exciting to be in a market that has that kind of growth, but still has those affordable prices that you just can't find everywhere else. So it's pretty interesting to see that and see how people are shifting and starting to look at those developing markets and be willing to go outside of their backyard. So I kind of want to highlight that a bit because that's a special skill to have. Whereas I live in San Diego. I invest in Central California where I grew up. So I understand the neighborhoods. I understand what the houses look like. I can relate to the people who live there. And so for me, it's an affordable market below the medium price point of the nation. And funny enough, most Californians, it's not on their radar. They don't even realize that part of California exists. But that being said, I preach, invest in your own backyard because you can go deeper and wider and, become more known in your market. But you've done that on a massive scale outside of your backyard. So that is just, I got to say, that's incredibly impressive. And so what are the special skill sets you'd say you had to develop and get good at to be able to go into other markets and have other people becoming involved? Like what would you say are kind of the top couple skill sets you had to develop to be able to pull that off?
I really think it comes down to creating relationship. That's one of the most important things you can do in any business, right? And no matter what part of real estate you play in, it's all about relationships. So really being somebody who can go, first of all, do a lot of background checking on people before doing business with them.
Yes. Amen to that. I'm going to repeat that if you didn't hear it in the back.
Yeah.
Background checks and do your due diligence on people. Make the 3, 4, 5 extra calls you have to check on people, because I have gotten gut punched and lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because of not doing that.
Me too. I mean, there was one team that I was working with in Pennsylvania, and I was a dummy. I mean, part of it is, so number one is you've got to understand who you're working with and do the background checks and make the phone calls and find out. People know people, right? So if you call local title companies or property managers, they might know who you're talking about. But certainly Google will too. But after that, the second thing is making sure that you know what you're doing and that you do all of your homework. With this Pennsylvania guy, I was like, find me a great house, because we were buying these houses for 20 grand. And like I said, putting 20, 30 or $40,000 into them. So he ends up like, oh yeah, I got this great house for you. It's going to be 50 grand all fixed up. I send him the money. I do everything I'm not supposed to do. And all the things I don't teach, I'm always teaching, send your money to escrow, get your inspections, get your appraisals, make sure that you've done your due diligence and background check, so to speak, on the property, right? You've got to know what you're buying. And I just was like, why would anyone mess with me? Because I'm going to bring this guy so much business. He's going to give me a great deal. I'm going to rave about it, and I'm going to send a lot of people to him. No, he ends up selling me this property that was so dangerous. I had the neighbor call and say, you have a family living in this house with small children, and they are in danger of the house caving in. This is how bad the property was. Now, I have enough money and savvy that I got a very good attorney, and I scared this person and I got my money back. But not everybody wants to spend that kind of money on an attorney. If I had just done my simple due diligence, got an inspection, appraisal, went to see the property, talked to a property manager before doing it, an independent one, not the one who's selling you the property, then I would have known.
You would have saved yourself a lot of hassle and pain and money and all that kind of stuff. Yes, I have been there and done that.
Because you trust people. You trust people, and
you're good-natured, so you believe other people are good-natured. You believe you attract good-natured people. I've been the same bushy-tailed, bright-eyed person too. And gosh, you'll run into an occasional person that if you don't clear them out and do your due diligence, that you might just get caught up. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
So you got to do, I mean, it's the same as, I like to compare it to when I took my family to Costa Rica for vacation and forgot to look at the exchange rate. And I just had a bunch of money. I didn't know what it was or what it was worth, but I was hungry. So we go to this sandwich shop and, they're like, I want this, and give them money. And they gave me money back, but I didn't know what it was. We walk out and I hear them giggling. And I just look at my kids and I'm like, that's the sound of someone who's just made a deal. They just ripped me off. And I don't even know how much because I don't know the exchange rate. That was on me, right? Of going into a foreign country and not being prepared. Yeah. It's the same thing with real estate. Just, you got to know what you're buying. You got to know what you're doing. And there's a lot of resources for you. Again, just find local boots on the street, licensed inspectors can probably tell you more about that property than you would know if you were walking through it yourself.
Totally. 100%. Okay. So, man, I'm just, there's been so much cool stuff that you've done that I'm thinking to myself, what else should I ask Kathy? Because there's so much stuff that we could dive into. We could be on here for hours, but, so let's shift to this last topic here. So, you've experienced when the market was down, and you have helped so many people through this journey of buying real estate to create that passive income and be able to retire. So based on where we're at right now, the sweet spot, how are you navigating this market shift? And also, what do you think is going to happen with the market?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I do market updates every quarter at realwealth.com. If you want to go look up those, I just finished one and I'll doing another one in January, but I also have economists on the Real Wealth Show all the time to kind of help me understand what's going on, because I'm not an economist, but I interview them all the time. So with that said, one thing I know for sure is that we have a situation today where most people who own real estate, who own their own home, are locked into rates far below what their rates are today. You have, I think it's like 30% in a 2% rate, and another, 30% in a 3 and a 4.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
It's, people who own real estate are in the best position that they've ever been in. They have equity, they've got low payments, and they're not going anywhere. So this is not, you can't compare today to 2008 ever.
Totally agree.
It's not the same. These people in 2008, I can tell you firsthand, never should have owned those homes, never qualified to begin with. That is not the case. Today's homeowners have the highest FICO scores. They have high income. They qualified. And you know how hard it is to qualify for a loan. They had to give every possible piece of documentation to back everything up. So very high credit, people who pay their bills and are in low payments. They have payments far less than rent today.
Yeah.
So, the idea that there would be some kind of housing crash, it's just not possible under those circumstances. Somebody's going to walk away from all the equity and their low payment because they lost their job when there's 10 million jobs available that they could go get. So, I'm with that said, the Federal Reserve realizes now, finally, far too late, that they stimulated the market for too long when it was already overstimulated. It's like giving your 2-year-old, more candy while they're
still giving away free money in certain programs.
What are they doing?
Exactly.
It's just, or it's just like, anyway, there's a lot of things to compare it to, but the Federal Reserve was stimulating the housing market until March of this year, when we already saw prices go up, 40% over 2 years. So they were just so late to the party, and now trying to turn off the lights and get everybody to go back home and go to bed. And it's not happening. There's too much money circulating. The Fed printed, the money supply today has increased to $21 trillion in circulation. Yeah. If you go back to 2008, it was $7 trillion. So we have 3 times the money in circulation. That's just money that they created out of thin air. And to have the audacity to say that's not going to create inflation it's ridiculous. Of course it is. when you've got 3 times the number of dollars in circulation in just the last 13 years. And in the last couple of years, 7 trillion was created, which is the amount of money that was in existence in America in 2008. So they've created the same amount, and they think that somehow that wasn't going to create inflation. Either that or they were lying to us and they knew it would. Yeah. But whatever it is, it's kind of obvious to the rest of us. They're trying to get that now out of the system. And usually how you pull money back out of the system is through bankruptcies and foreclosures and stock market crashes and all of that, losing jobs. It's all the negative stuff that they're trying to do right now is crash the economy and to curb this inflation. So far, they failed. However, I'm pretty sure that when you look at year over year inflation numbers, basically the year over year inflation numbers have been hovering around that 8% mark, which is 8% higher than a year ago. So it's inflation's been kind of flat. But when you see the headlines, it's like, it's up 8%, but that's not it. We're talking year over year. Now, when we get to December, that's when inflation reared its ugly head. Basically, it came up right around then. So by December, we're going to start to see year over year numbers that aren't that bad, but we're not going to see that till January. So until January, the Fed is going to keep doing what it's going to do. And pretty soon things are going to look okay. And as soon as inflation looks like it's been tamed, because it really has been hovering around that 8% mark, not going much higher than it, in fact, coming down. We know that commodity prices are coming down. So basically, mortgage rates follow inflation. If inflation comes back down, we'll most likely see mortgage rates coming back down too, which is what I see. And if that happens in Q2 of next year, Q1 of next year, we're going to see another housing frenzy. So it's like we have this 4, 5, 6 month little window to get in and buy deals, because most people think that rates are going to continue to climb. I just don't see that.
Yeah,
I don't think that's going to happen.
I wouldn't say I'm the person who's studied and spent a lot of time, but from having conversations with smart people like you who have smart conversations with other people too, that's kind of the theme that I'm hearing as well, is that they're going to be coming back down. So that's reassuring and positive, which further supports now is a great time to buy while the sentiment of the market is down, and get better deals, so that when the market does come back to a better light, you're in the position to where it's now maybe appreciating, and you bought it at a depreciating or kind of stagnant kind of market. So that's some great insight. I'm super glad to hear that and excited. And so, man, Kathy, what a pleasure to have you on. Again, I'm just sitting here thinking about all the other questions I could and want to ask you, but we might have to have you back on again and talk more about the exciting things you're doing. But thank you so much for being on. Again, guys, if you want to follow Kathy, you can go to the many websites, kathyfettke.com. You can go to realwealth.com. You can go to growdevelopments.com and find her online at Kathy Fettke on Instagram and all the other platforms. So, Kathy, any last words?
Just like I said, just stay educated and don't listen to headlines, because they're just meant to scare you. And headlines can be interpreted many different ways. So interpret it the way that it best serves the investor. Yeah.
Well, you of all people who have been in the business know that best. So great advice there. Thanks again, Kathy. Appreciate it. And until next time, peace.
See you later.